Howdy, Ags. We recorded this episode prior to Bruce's appointment as interim CEO of HP. We wish him the best with that appointment, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
I looked through my life, and some of the biggest learnings I had was the mistakes I've made. And I don't regret those because they allowed me to then accelerate to where I could go.
Welcome to Aggie Legends, where we talk with founders, CEOs, and other successful Aggies about the lessons in leadership that they've experienced throughout their careers. I'm Ben Wiggins, May's MBA class of 2018, and today we have Bruce Broussard joining us. Bruce is a finance and accounting graduate of May's Business School. Bruce had a storied career in healthcare services, holding many executive positions. Most recently, he was president and CEO of Humana, which he led for more than a decade before stepping down in 2024. He serves on multiple corporate and nonprofit boards, including as board chair of the Trust for the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Bruce, you're a first-generation college graduate, and it wasn't even a given that you would go to college. How did you end up at Texas A&M?
Well, Ben, first, I just want to say thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
And it's an interesting story as I think back. And if I was to roll where I was thinking then to where I am now, I would have never imagined. But it really, in high school, I was not the best student. My counselor told me to go to vocational school. Okay. And I'm, as you mentioned, I'm a first generation individual going to college. And I said, I don't know if that's the right thing for me. I should go to college. But more importantly, my friends influenced me to come to school. And so I decided to go to school. Now, the question that's probably got a sub discussion to it is why did I choose A&M? Yeah. And, it's funny. I applied to different Texas schools, and I was accepted to UT. I went to the UT orientation in the summer, but I realized after the conclusion of that orientation that I will never get out of that school because of Austin, because of my friends, my girlfriend was going to be there, and I really had a lot of fondness for A&M's values and almost the inherent discipline it brings. And I said, if I'm going to get out of school, I need to go to an environment that will instill that in me. And I remember calling up the admissions office and saying, that's when you had dial phones and those kind of things, and saying, am I still accepted? And they said, yes, we don't have a dorm for you. So I had to live off campus and I had to put something together, but ultimately that's how I got here. Yeah. And I am so thankful I did.
What was most remarkable about your student experience? Like what do you really remember? How did it change you? I'm
a big believer in environment. And environment is not just what you're in from a point of view of buildings and all the materialistic things. It's about the people. And I just found A&M's friendliness. I found that there's a goodness here, that you want to do the right thing, the values of hard work. And I think it's a lot of the university stems from the original military back in the 70s and 60s, but it's that foundation that brought it here. And then ultimately, what I've seen in today, the friendship that I created here have been deep. And in fact, every year my roommates and I will go away for 3 or 4 days, and that was 40 some years ago, and so it's a neat value system that inherently forms your judgment around life, and so it's not just an education and what you get from a sort of a degree point of view. It's how you live your life.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a moment where you felt overwhelmed? You felt like maybe I am in over my head. Maybe college wasn't the right choice for me, or conversely, once you got here, did you feel, all right, this is where I needed to be all along?
I would say early on it was intimidating.
Yeah.
Intimidating for a few reasons. A, not to know what to expect. B, my family just wasn't, in that crowd, so to speak. And then C, taking courses that that seemed difficult at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I would say it wasn't a straight line, but it was comfortably pushing me. I would say. It wasn't very stressful, but it was comfortably pushing me.
And then you majored in accounting and finance, and you're a CPA, but you rose to leadership positions relatively early in your career then. Tell us about that development then, from technical expertise to honing the skills that made you a good manager and leader.
Yeah. I think there's a number of levels of that. I think what I found in my education, it gave me a base of understanding, but it did not give me the deep technical skills of that. But in addition, it gave me a base of understanding who I was, but it didn't give me the how to do it. And I really found that building some foundational skills, this wasn't a target of mine, it just sort of came, was really important. And these foundation skills I found have served me through my life. And I went back to Houston and worked in Houston, and I lived in the northern suburbs and commuted, and I had a long commute, 45 minutes or so. And on the way to my to work, I'd listen to tapes, and I'd listen to motivational tapes that gave me a sense of what are those things that you're searching for. And I found, purpose was a really important part, and you need to have a reason to do something. That's not only about financial gratitude, is about making an impact. The second thing I found is that the ability to do this in a way that is impactful, and to be able to orient to the impact side, have a positive mindset that, every day is not going to be the best day, but thinking that there's just have gratitude. I also found the ability for us to also have this growth mindset. So this ability to be curious, this ability to take risk, this ability to really put yourself in an uncomfortable position and grow from it. And those principles around purpose, around this ability to growth mindset, this positive mentality, and this ability for you to sort of take the risks that you want, were all important aspects to what I look at today.
How do you feel that your approach to impact and your approach to growth mindset may differ from others? Like, what is the unique Bruce, take on impact and on growth mindset?
Yeah, I would say it's probably not different from everyone, but I would say I start from being a servant. And start from what can I do to help others, as opposed to what is doing it for me. And I found that, especially early in my career, really allowed me to advance more than others, because I didn't go there just to do the job. I went there to say, well, how can I be the best for the person I'm working for, and be the best in that, so that their product that I'm giving them is superior, that allows them to do their job better, or make them look better, or the client is more satisfied, whatever it may be. But this idea of servitude.
How did that value and your other values guide you in difficult moments? Like what was, early in career and in leadership, what was the nexus of
this idea of doing the right thing, that gets back to your whole purpose, was really important, of that, and servitude. Both of those were large drivers of that. And I would say the doing the right thing was very important in those trying decisions. Servitude was more, why am I doing the work I'm doing, and who am I serving, and how the quality of it.
Yeah.
But this idea of purpose was very important in these tougher decisions.
What was the time that those core values really cut the most?
Just to give you an example of the idea of doing right, the purpose of it. A number of years ago, our family bought a large hotel on the east coast of Florida, and it was built in the 1930s, and we converted it to an assisted living facility.
Okay.
And then we built another complex to it that was similar to a senior apartment complex kind of activity. So it was an aging community, so to speak. And as we were building the second building, it got hit by 4 hurricanes.
4 hurricanes.
4 hurricanes.
Okay.
It was back in the mid 2000s when there was 4 hurricanes that came through Florida, and every one of them decided to hit the town that this building was
Wonderful
in.
news.
Yeah, exactly. And after the 4th one, and ironically, every time we put a floor up, a hurricane would come. So
that was like the testing,
exactly.
the testing process.
After the 4th one, I said, stop putting any more floors up, kind of thing. But
Right.
but what I remember calling the structural engineer and saying, listen, we need to test this to see just structurally, is it right? I mean, and it came back and they said it had some warped walls and we could fix it, and some beams had some water, wind blowing rain in it. But I asked him, I said, I'm going to put 120 elderly people. I want to make sure it not only is safe, but there's no chance of mold or any other residue that comes from this.
Yeah.
And he says, well, we can't guarantee that, but we think it's okay. And I thought about that, and went home, and next day I went to the office, and I called him and I said, I'm not feeling good that you can just say we can get it, but I can't guarantee that, because I can't guarantee the product to our seniors.
Sure.
And I said, so we're going to knock it down. And so I called the insurance company, and they said, well, we're going to patch it. They told me what they were going to pay me. And it was a 250,000 square foot building. And I said, well, that's not going to work for me, because I don't feel the right thing is to think it's okay, as opposed to being insured it's okay, or assured, I should say.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we're not going to pay for the knockdown. I told them, I said, well, listen, on November 15th, there's going to be a wrecking ball out there. This after going back and forth with them, and we're going to knock it down. And so you can take all the pictures you want, but after November 15th, we're going to rebuild it. And that's what I did. Now, 3 years later, we went to court, and I actually ultimately won. But the point I'm trying to make to that, it would have been a lot easier, a lot less risk, probably would have a few less gray hairs if I would have just sort of did what the structural engineer said. But recognizing who ultimately is going to be using that, and the health and wealth for them, is what I was oriented to.
Yeah.
And to me, not being purpose-driven, I would have probably then gone and said, well, the financial way would be the easiest and the right way to do it and be more practical. But that purpose-driven aspect is an important part of that. And there's a number of those decisions in my life that sitting back and saying, what's the right thing to do, even though it's more painful, you need to follow through on that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and thanks for making the right decision for
the community. Yeah, the community.
Let's talk then about mentorship and the ways that you've relied on guidance from, trusted parties, trusted people throughout your career. How did that process shift and evolve from young career to the C-suite?
The definition of mentor, I think, is interesting. It's a combination of a number of things, and you really have to be thoughtful around what are you looking from a mentor. There's networking or connector kind of activity. There's a coach that is looking and trying to give you advice. There's somebody that's motivating you, someone that's giving you advice, and not just from coaching you, but you have a circumstance that you're inquiring on. Role model. And early in my career, I found that the role model was a really important part of my mentoring. I remember working for an individual in the consulting experience that I had, and I just was amazed at his breadth of knowledge and his technical skills, his ability to handle the clients. And I remember saying to myself, I want to learn from him. And so how can I get in the environment that he's in and learn? What I didn't know at the time, but it's paid dividends over the years, is I didn't know he was a really tough guy to work for. No one else wanted to work for him, to be honest. I mean, he was rude at times. Sometimes he'd be demeaning. He'd be command and control. But he expected a lot out of you. Expected a lot out of you. And between the combination of his skills and knowledge and his ability to and this expectation, it really changed my life. It was painful and in ways, but I wouldn't go back. And when I trace back my success to him, it really has a lot of the reasons why I'm successful over the years. I think first, just my commitment to high quality, my pushing not to take just the surface answer, to ask deeper questions and understand, my ability to be attentive to details but still have a broader perspective. This opportunity, and in the case of finance, to be really deep in understanding the different parts, whether it's bond documents to forecasting to structuring deals, all those things I learned from him. And so it was an amazing opportunity, but it brought a lot of pain. Now there's things that I thought I learned from him, but they weren't the right things to learn. So I had to move on to mentoring there. But this idea of being really strong in the field that I was in and having a work ethic around quality and the ability to think big but small was very important elements.
I want to hear more about the stuff you chose to put aside, like the mentorship you chose to say, I see, how you got here, but this is not going to be me.
Yeah. So attributing my first CFO job, and the reason why I got it really is to him. And in my first CFO job in a public company, and I was 31 or so, I really thought command and control was the way you led.
Okay.
Because that's what he taught me.
Sure, and that honestly is kind of what we have come from. Yeah. Like that was, I think, a much more common style of leadership back then.
Yeah, and what I learned through some both mistakes and observations of others, that command and control isn't the way you lead people. You lead people through giving a purpose, getting to their heart. You then, create a direction to get there. People call it a strategic plan.
Sure.
And then you execute with milestones, measurements, and things like that, where you're measuring your progress that way. But as importantly, you communicate to them how they fit into it. And that communication of how they fit into it, around with all the other communication of where we're going and through storytelling and other things like that, I just found is able to bring the heart out of somebody, the mind in their hands, to really accomplish really great things. And to me, it's not go do that. It's really building the reason to do it and the how to do it and the reminding of why we're doing it.
I think a lot about how being in a more connected world, a world with better tools, a world, just all of the stuff that we have now to assist us in the workplace and with relationships, cell phones, AI, like all of that sort of thing, how that enables the better style of leadership that we're talking about here. If command and control was more necessary in going back to the, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, like if there was a sense in which kind of the more autocratic style of leadership was more necessary then than it is now, was it still caused the same problems, but if there were problems that it was solving that we honestly don't need to solve now because we're solving them in other ways with technology or whatever.
Yeah, well, maybe I'd give you a little perspective on that. Technology is actually creating different problems that we need to solve. And there's a behavioral model that is around how do you manage simple things, how do you manage complex things, and how do you manage complicated things.
What's the difference between the last two?
So, and the first one is to put it in, and I'm really talking about the problem itself.
Okay.
The simple thing is more where it's a known problem. You have the answer, you need to fix it. And that's where command and control probably comes into play, because the expert So it's on the manufacturing line.
Right.
Or the person that grew up on the manufacturing line sees it, oh, we know what, this part is broken.
Makes total
sense. We need
sense.
to get this, and this is what we need to do. So
Sure.
that brings a simpler concept, a simpler solution to the table.
Sure.
A complex problem is a problem that has a known answer but has many answers to it. And you have to pick the answer. And so there's this level of expertise and there's a problem-solving aspect to it. And so that one would be, listen, we have this issue with the pricing. And we need to solve the pricing, and there's formulas to figure it out and so on. And now we need to decide which pricing model we want to go. And so there's a method to get there. You just need to go through the method.
Yeah.
And so that requires a little bit of thinking, but it still requires this expertise and simplicity that you learn through time.
Great.
Complicated problems are where there's so many dimensions to it that you don't know the answer and there hasn't been there before. And so you have to work through test and learns. You have to get different diversity of thought.
Yeah, you're speaking my language.
So you have to get the, you have to try things out and fail. And to me, that latter part is really where this management of giving people a purpose and then being able to drive towards have a strategy, but they're figuring out more and more about the how as opposed to you telling them how to do it. And I think the business world, because of integration of technology, brings multidimensional aspects of it, that you're really creating this need to have leaders that can discover the solution as opposed to know the solution. And the discovery process is an important part of that.
It sounds like then all leadership is becoming more entrepreneurial to some degree.
Yeah, entrepreneurial and solutions that are much less known because the world's much more complicated and the technology has created that complication.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard business defined as taking the unknown and making it known.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. You led a Fortune 50 company. You advise other large organizations as a board member. What is the quintessential Bruce Broussard style that you bring to your work?
Yeah, I would say if you were to ask, people, they would say
command and control.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, caring.
Yeah.
In fact, I got a book when I stepped down from Humana. That was 50 pages or so that the company asked people to write notes in.
Oh.
And the common actually the book was Caring. That was the name of the book.
Okay.
And it was a summation of all the different comments that were in there. So this idea of servitude, this idea of purpose, really is where I start from. And then it evolves to this complex thinker. And sometimes, as I tell my wife, I make things that are simple complex. And but I have an ability to sort of Rubik's Cube, put it together, and connect the dots there. I would say humble in my approach and curious.
Okay.
And so those are the areas where I sort of, I would say people would define me as, and that has defined my leadership style.
Yeah. We've had a few leaders on this show, have been fortunate to talk with some other leaders, and it seems like the best leaders almost function just as a conduit for kind of doing what is best for the organization as a whole. Like the best leader in their leadership role per se is almost, they're a person of their own, but they're almost not an entity of their own. It's just sort of the collected, will of what's best for the organization and for the people that serve it.
Almost a conductor of the symphony.
It's a good way of putting it.
And I found, I was visiting with some students today, and they asked me, how did you make decisions? That was a question that was asked. And I said, I didn't make many decisions. And they said, I know what they're thinking. Well, Jesus, this guy must have not been a very effective CEO. But my reasoning for that is that my job is to pull the best out of people, so the decision becomes almost apparent.
Yeah, obvious.
And what I find is the best tool a leader has is the questions they ask. And because what happens if you sit in a room and people are looking at you to make the decision, you don't have all the context. You don't have all the thoughts. And there's been many times I'd walk in the room, I said, oh, I know the answer to this. I know this is what we're going to do. And I would walk out of that and it would be totally different because I asked others what they were thinking. And it could be on a broader topic or it could be on a very specific subject. And you bring out different contexts that then the group can make the decision. And then they then begin to start to formulate the decision. And that's much more powerful because you get diversity of thought, you get ownership, and then you also get the ability to display the making of the cake in front of everybody. And then you then they feel better about it. And then, so when you walk out of that room, you have much more alignment than if you just say, hey, we're going to go do this, let's go do it kind of thing. And it's much easier to go do say I'm going to go do this and that's what I do. And but you're not effective. So I find that leaders make less decisions. Good leaders make less decisions by orchestrating their team.
Yeah, no, I love that. What would you say are the most important things for them to focus on?
I would say society. You can attribute it to social media and everything's perfect on social media. You can attribute it to the expectations that we have set for the next generation. That perfection is such an important part of what people are striving for. And I'm not convinced perfection is the best thing. I found I made many, many mistakes. And it gets back to that growth mindset about being curious, taking risks, those things. And I think you need to discover life through making mistakes. And I feel we are so making a mistake is viewed as a bad thing. When I look through my life and some of the biggest learnings I had was the mistakes I've made. And I don't regret those because they allowed me to then accelerate to where I could go. And to me, I think as I think about individuals and they're coming out of school, and being prepared for success, I would just continue to say life is about discovery. And don't be afraid of making mistakes.
What was the most important mistake that you made? What was the thing that, like the thing that then learning from that mistake or whatever rolled out of it took you forward to something that was really important in the future?
There's been a number. I mean, I made the comment about command and control as a leader. And that's an example of a mistake. And I found that my engagement scores were terrible. I found that, we weren't the team was not on the same page. And I wasn't an effective leader. And so but that was an example of it. There's many examples that I would say that have impacted me. But I would say the ones that have been most impactful are where I learned where my strengths and weaknesses are. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
I was a CFO for the company I described relative to taking it public, and then went to another company and became the chief operating officer. And then I said, I'm going to go start a company. And so I went and started a company, and one of the investment firms that were invested in the public company said, hey, we'll back you, kind of thing. So I went and did it. It was not a flop, but it wasn't a success. We got out with our capital and so on, but I learned a lot in that. I learned where my strengths are, and what I learned is complexity is one of my strengths. Dealing with the big things that are complicated and that are need to be torn apart and put back together kind of thing, I do really well at.
Okay.
I get better as it gets bigger.
Oh.
And because of the way I can influence people and push people along.
Right.
And so if it's small and it's not very complicated, I don't do good at it. And so you saw me sort of revert back and say, I really don't want to do the small ones. I'm much better at the bigger ones. And that really, set me another way. And my wife will always say, because it was 3 or 4 years of my life at that time, and I was in my, mid-30s, and it was a sort of, an important part of my life. And my wife says that was the best learning you had. And because she saw my clarity of what I was good at and where I could go. And so that was an example where I wouldn't have gotten there, both appreciated it.
Yeah.
And in addition, always, and I probably wouldn't have been as skillful as I am today as a result of that.
That's thank you for telling that story, and appreciate your honesty about that experience. One other thing that I was curious about with respect to mistakes, I do think that we as a society are getting better at embracing failure and feeling like failure is not final. When you think about how young people and experienced people should think about going and go fail aggressively, but maybe do it in this particular way. How do you think about that?
Well, first, your first 2 points around, I guess back to the whole purpose thing and doing the right thing. And there you don't want to compromise that. So you never want to, cut the edges off kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think this idea of how big do you fail is a question of iteration, test and learn, and what you would do in a business. And I'm going through it now. I've been defining myself over the years as a CEO of a public company. And, I have to change what as I call it, the I am. And what do I want to do and be? And I know what I want, but I don't know the how. And so, I'm going through testing and learning and trying different things and for myself. Yeah. And the discovery is frustrating, but it's fun. It's the ability to see things that I didn't see, and I sometimes I'll get down on myself. Well, why didn't you know that or this and that? But I'm not taking life risks. I'm iterating through it and saying I've thought about this and I've done my diligence on it, and I'm gonna test this out and see if it works. Yeah.
Would you say that process of discovering yourself is as important as, the lessons that we learn for career pursuits and all that sort of thing?
Very much. I think being grounded in what your principles, and not only values, but be grounded in what you're good at and what you enjoy, being grounded in things that motivate you, your passion. I don't think if you don't know that, it's really hard to just make a decision and direction in this broadest concepts. Now, as you narrow them down, it's there. And sometimes you have to define those, and sometimes you have to, go through a process, whether that process is, asking yourself questions to, going through and experiencing it.
Yeah. I know that's something that my dad retired several years ago from the university and had to make very specific efforts to really, really build his circle of friends, for example, and to, find new hobbies. And he said that a lot of guys that he knew just kind of faded as they transitioned out of their largest career roles.
Yeah, and it is that, because it gets back to that redefining the I am. And I say that because it defined you for so long, and I think for men, because ego and other things like that is probably, as you say, is a little more compounded. But it creates this. Well, that's who I am, and then you go on that trajectory, and you have to really redefine who you are, and you have to do it internally. And sometimes it's concurrent, but you have to do it internally as well as externally. And I do think that transition is always difficult.
I certainly wish you luck with it. And thank you, Bruce, for sharing your lessons in leadership on Aggie Legends with us today. On behalf of Mays Business School, I'm Ben Wiggins, and this is Aggie Legends. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps. Leave a comment if you have a moment. Here at Mays Business School, we're building a better future through business, and we thank you for being a part of it.